happy New Year to everyone.
Happy New
Thank you all.
Year.
Thank you all for joining us, and we're kicking off a whole new year of Code Remix weekly sessions. So pleased to be with you again. As always, I'm Tim Tobik. With me here is Sam Snyder, and as
Hello,
a special
pleasure.
guest, we have Justine.
Yeah.
Hello.
Good to have you. So should be good. I'm really looking forward to all the new episodes we'll be doing. I think, of course, I've been working for the past couple of weeks, and usually the time between Christmas and New Year's for a lot of companies is like this slow period where you don't get a lot of things done. And I think we're pretty much the opposite. So for the folks that were in the office, fewer meetings, fewer distractions, you get a ton of things done. And it
I,
should be
I
good.
I know the feeling, Tim. I've had some this holiday. I mostly took time off and didn't do a whole lot. But in the past, I've had some really productive holiday seasons where where no one's bothering you for anything, so you can work on whatever you feel like. And since the baseline expectation is zero, you do the tiniest little thing. It's all bonus. It's like 110% immediately. Like fix the smallest problem, like nailed it, killing it for today.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So I think we can as usual we'll do a bit of an overview of things new in the past couple of weeks, and then after that we're gonna jump into more detail on what Justine has been doing and what is maybe coming up in the near future. But I'll share a couple screens and take you through some of the things that are new in the past couple of weeks. So one of the things that we've been working on in the past couple of weeks is expanding our support for Lombok. So we already had Lombok as an experimental feature that you could enable explicitly in Java 17. But with a lot of help from Anshuman, we've now been able to fix a thing that was bugging us in Lombok upstream, such that we can now add Lombok probably just by default to Open Rerun. So we've added it, we're in the process of adding it to Java 8, but we have added it to Java 11 recently. We've added it to Java 21 just yesterday. I think we merged this one. And with that, I think we're very close to enabling Lombok support by default, which should be pretty good.
Yeah, there's still some little bugs or problems in there. So I think it'll stay behind a feature flag for now. One challenge is that, and this is maybe a little deep in the parsing details to get into fully or anything, but in some cases, and I haven't even identified all of them yet necessarily, when you have Lombok enabled, that the Java compiler internal abstract syntax tree sometimes comes out with slightly inaccurate like line numbers and positions, which we use in some places in the parser to figure out, what like white space to grab for an LST element. So if you enable this, you might get some funny little parse errors, but it would still probably be better for a Lombok code base or a code base that use Lombok extensively to have this enabled. But we'll work out the kinks.
And of course, very neat that in tandem with this effort of adding it to the parser, we're also working on recipes to allow you to adopt Lombok to the fullest. So we've added some recipes where you can detect explicit getters and setters or no-R constructors and replace those with the familiar Lombok annotations to be able to do that. I think we also have that implemented for logging annotations, such that any explicit loggers can be replaced with the annotations from Lombok, really just allowing you to clear those things out now that we are very near better support in the parser, as opposed to the missing type attribution that you would get previously. So that's very cool to see come together. So then, also new in the past couple of weeks is that we have Greg helping out to squash parser errors in this case on ACL parser that we have, the parser we use for Terraform. And he has completed no less than, 9 parser issues already in the past couple of days.
Nice.
So we're really glad to have him join the team and be able to squash these. And I know that he's looking at issues for JSON parsers next, for YAML parsers next, and maybe even the Java parser. So really helpful to have someone fully dedicated to this type of work and very skilled at doing so, if I can say so. So pretty neat. Also new is that we added support for TOML file parsing. So that is coming out from Shannon, who's been on the show, I think about a year ago. And then,
And I think we'll be on the show
yeah,
again shortly, as we have him on to talk about this specific thing, probably 2 weeks from now. Yeah, I think this isn't the first parser we've had contributed from outside Moderne. I mean, to the extent that Shannon counts as outside Moderne, he's technically employed by Shelter Insurance, not us. But he's made so many high quality contributions. I almost feel like Shelter is subsidizing half a half a Shannon for us. No one tell Shelter Management that. He's doing a lot of great work for you guys, I promise.
absolutely. So this is really neat because it will unlock further use cases, like if you have any TOML configuration files, or if you use TOML within Gradle to manage your version numbers, your plugin version numbers. And we should be able to target these with the changes that we're making to recipes to take full advantage of this parser. It should be coming out in the next release that's coming up. I'm trying to get that out the door tomorrow, but it's the best effort, and we'll see if we actually make it there. Also new in the past couple of weeks is that we've had a ton of fixes related to our Gradle and Groovy parsers, because we've had some feedback from folks that not all the features that they were using were supported well, and now I think we've had some, I think close to a dozen individual fixes to the Groovy parser that should also be rolled up into a new release. So if you had issues parsing your projects before, then know that help is on the way in the next releases.
But I would still be surprised if it's fully supported Spock tests, which I know is a use case for Groovy because their syntax is just, or particularly can be really out there. The focus for the Groovy support remains on being able to parse and manipulate Groovy Gradle scripts. And your mileage may vary if you really do have a large and mature Groovy code base that extensively uses the language features, or particularly if you were using its very flexible features around constructing DSLs with the exotic syntax.
Yeah, there's a bit of a challenge there, and I think there's also some improvements we could be making to the Maven and Gradle plugins, where we maybe don't fully add the class path entries to our Groovy parsers as we do for our Java and our Kotlin parsers. But of course, it's ongoing work, and if you want to help out, then be sure to report the issues, your findings, maybe open a draft PR for things that you'd like to see improved still. So that's all very good. Another new and exciting feature that we've seen added, I think over the past couple of weeks, even though the effort has been running for a bit longer, is to actually map the erroneous nodes if you have a file that we cannot completely successfully parse. Now, this shouldn't really affect you much if your files are all well formed, but if you have files that aren't maybe perfectly represented, perfectly interpreted by the Java compiler, then you can still be able to map those elements to LST elements and be able to reproduce those files. So this we've seen this pop up from time to time where folks had tests that were maybe relying on inputs that were incorrect, and in those cases you might now see an erroneous node. So in those cases, likely there's something to fix in your test. But I'm calling it out here because it might pop up for things that you could be fixing in your Java templates or your unit tests. So that's it on these types of developments. Then looking ahead, there's also some new events coming up. Now,
That person looks
Justine,
familiar.
I think I know her.
yeah, slightly different color of hair, maybe.
I know. I wasn't even that much of a redhead when the picture was taken, but I think the light was really reddish outside.
So yeah, that's coming up in February. I don't quite so end of February. So that should be good. I think it's in Montreal. Yeah,
It is. And I've been told by many people the food there is really good and they're very proud of their caterers. So if you like a good conference with good food, definitely go to Confu.
That is good to hear. Yeah, it's always one of those things that makes you enjoy a conference that much more.
It definitely helps.
Yeah, especially in cold Montreal in February, you're going to want to find reasons to stay inside with your colleagues.
Yeah, you don't want to head out for something better just around the corner.
Exactly.
It involves.
It's just not worth it.
So then, also in February is that I'm going to be at a conference together with Merlin Bogershausen, a new colleague at Moderne, where we're going to be doing a workshop at the OOP25 conference in Munich this early February. So we're looking forward to that. Should be good to see each other once again. And I'll finally have him wearing a Moderne t-shirt and being part of the crew. So that should be good. Now, if you had missed maybe some sessions that I did at JFOL, then you can now watch them online. So that's really neat. There's my session on generative AI is there with a lot of help from Justine in getting me able to present that one. And then also one that we did for the Innovation Award, where we took part and were one of the most innovative projects according to the Dutch Java user group. So really neat. You can watch those online. We'll share the links as always in the notes attached to this write-out. And then also new is that we are doing some very neat things with internally developed recipes at Moderne. So we have 2 new modules where we have some ongoing development here. And one of them is on compiled analysis, where we're gonna, or we already have functionality that allows you to check that your sources will still compile after running a recipe. And there's some more checks that we're doing there, but this should be really helpful to clear out any potential issues with recipes that you have. And it's really neat to be able to work on these efforts still. And then also new is some work on rewrite comprehension. I'm not sure if Justine was involved, but she's at least inspired in this type of work, where we are now able to do some information of the project that we're analyzing and then generate maybe a README, as we've seen contributed already, just through new recipes that we combine the best of LLMs with analyzing the project that we have. So lots of new work to be able to share with you over the past 3 weeks. And we really look forward to dive deep into all of this in upcoming episodes. So really cool. So with that, I'm through the tabs that I wanted to show you. So I think we can take it from here.
Yeah. So for anyone who might not be aware, Justine is our AI researcher. So many of the interesting new features which combine open rewrite and modern technologies with large language models or other artificial intelligence constructs are down to her investigation, innovation, and integration of these different components together. So welcome again, Justine, to the I was about to say podcast, but just like close your eyes and think of it as a podcast for a second, I suppose. But to the webcast, to the live stream, pleasure to have you, Justine, and hopefully you had a lovely holiday and New Year.
Thank you. I did. I have my microphone ready for the podcast.
Oh, nice. You have a nicer microphone than me. I need to go buy a nicer microphone. I feel like my audio quality is not quite up to the standard that our viewers deserve.
I like it. I feel like there's a little radio feeling to your microphone. It's not that bad.
I do have in my family tree several people who were or even still are radio presenters.
There you go. Natural.
Oh, look, it is a podcast for Kevin. Excellent.
Oh, I love that. But yes, I did have a great holiday. How about yourselves?
It was good. It was good. I had a lot of fun with family. Caught up. Finally finished a painting that I had been working on and off for years. So I was happy to kind of get that one over the finish line. Finally start the new year without like in the back of my mind like you should finish that painting always being there.
Absolutely, that's great. I saw it and it was really, really good. Very impressive.
And Tim, you were telling me about a really tasty sounding confection, if not unique to the Netherlands, and very popular in the Netherlands. What was that called?
So that's called oliebollen, which literally translated is just balls made with oil.
Uh-huh.
But what it is a deep fried batter. So they soak up all the oil, and that's the thing you have like New Year's Eve and the
Oh.
2 days after when you still need to clear those out. So you have them for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And then you, I don't know, powdered sugar over them, and you have all your calories for the rest of the month. So pretty good.
It's kind of funny. In my house, my partner is very into cooking and baking, and so she made a whole like set of confections, right? Like almond cookies with powdered sugar
Mm.
on them, just to start. But also has ended up lactose intolerant, not able to eat milk products recently. So people have given us gifts of like chocolate cookies and fudge. So I've had like a backlog of candy and treats to work through where Genevieve's like, "You got to eat those chocolates. I can't eat those chocolates," and I'm like, "I still got to deal with all the almond cookies." So it's a good problem to have. I guess I'm boasting right now. But yeah,
Oh, that's
those
great.
those 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 fried dough balls, those sound really good. How about you, Justine? Do you have a favorite like snack or confection or family tradition of anything that you eat around this time?
It really changes what we eat for Christmas depending on. We don't only do like turkey or something like that.
Sure, sure, of course.
But one thing we do enjoy doing is on after Christmas on the 6th of January, although I end up sometimes celebrating it earlier than that.
Sure.
It's called the Galette des Rois. So I guess the king's cake or something like that. It's a puff pastry, basically. In between and in between the two puff pastries layer, there's a ground almond paste and sweet,
Uh-huh.
and then
Ooh.
they'll hide a little figurine in it, and you cut it
That
up.
that I don't like as much.
No,
Like
you
you
don't
should,
like
I feel like
breaking
you
a
shouldn't
tooth,
put non-food inside of food. Like it's a little landmine. It's like,
pretty
here's
much.
a cookie, but inside of it is buried a rock. Like, no, you don't put that in cookies.
But if you
But
get it, you're king.
oh, that is good. That is good.
So
And your first decree can be the king gets needs to go to the dentist for the chipped tooth.
exactly. They used to do a dried bean, so maybe that would be more. You could change it back to that instead of having a little figurine in there.
I have some Greek family members who will do a similar thing with I'm somehow drawing a blank on the triangular phyllo dough pastries,
Like spanakopita?
like spanakopita, but those ones usually have a spinach. But anyway, I don't know how it could possibly not be coming to me. I've had these so many times in my life, but
Baklava?
yeah, baklava. Yeah,
Okay.
I don't know how could anyone forget baklava? But yeah, there's where a Greek family member will make baklava and hide a quarter inside, and if you get that one, it's like, yeah, you're like the king or whatever. You got the lucky baklava. And I'm almost like, I hope I don't get that one because I don't want to bite into a pastry and bite metal.
That is so funny. I like
So
that.
I don't know. It seems like many cultures have a tradition of hiding small inedible things in food as a good thing somehow. Honestly, I feel like that was you know how like a surgeon operating on someone maybe sometimes forgets to like take a scalpel out before like or whatever out before sewing
Yeah.
them up. I feel like the tradition started with a cook who was just not as careful as they should have been about what went into the batter. And when called on it, we're like, you're lucky, actually. Congratulations, King. And they were
Yeah.
like, oh, I feel good about this now. I'm not going to report them to the health code violation, department.
It reminds me when I went to an opening of a Mexican restaurant,
Ooh.
and there was a bolt in the middle of the sour cream jar
Oh, no.
or a little pot. And I was just like,
Did they declare you king?
yeah, right? That's what they should have done.
Well, Christmas time and New Year's is for now over, although we will look forward to seeing it again. So, in this new year, Justine, you have some really cool stuff to tell us about and show us about with integrating artificial intelligence, LLMs, etc., with the more deterministic capabilities provided by Open Rewrite. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have this new thing that we worked on, sour cream cake. This new thing that we worked on No official name. Maybe we're leading towards mod agent. We'll see. Comment ideas of names as we present what this tool can do, but we'll refer to it as mod agent for today. Basically, this idea was we wanted to have something to wrap around the CLI. So for those who maybe haven't used the CLI, it's a way to run recipes, surprise, surprise, on the CLI on your terminal, where you can basically even have, your recipes in IntelliJ, and you can set a recipe as your active recipe, have the CLI open on the side, and you can say run active recipe, and then give the path to whatever repos you want to run it on. So it's a really useful tool. It really, we wanted to have everyone be able to use Moderne and Open Rewrite in a way that makes sense in their flow. And so the idea was basically, all right, well, what if there was a fourth way to use this? We have the IDE, we have the platform, we have the CLI, and what if you could just chat with
What if you didn't
someone?
know what you wanted to do up front necessarily, or maybe if you didn't know what recipe to do it with? I mean, I've been working here the entire time, and I don't know what all the recipes in our recipe catalog are, and it's a very frequent question we get asked. Do you have a recipe for X? So people, no one's going to build a mental index of the 3,000 and always growing list of recipes that will be comprehensive. And so the kind of question of what's applicable to my code is ever present on the lips of the people.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes you'll have these recipes, and we try to make them as modular as possible because that's really just the best way to have them, so they can really be applicable in many scenarios. But you might not remember exactly what you want for every. Before you look at the recipe and see what it takes as arguments or parameters. So that's a really nice way to be able to use that as well, to have basically this chatbot that fills in those parameters for you based on your query. So that's the general idea behind it. I think everything makes always more sense when you see it. So shall we dive into it?
Yeah, let's show us.
Perfect. Let's do it. All right, so this is not the end UI for this, I promise, but to give a first, look into it. How big is this? Is this big enough for people?
I think it's fine.
Yeah, that's legible.
Okay, sounds good. So you have the mean. It's like really like a ChatGPT. It's truly a chatbot. So when I first called it, I gave it a path to basically some repos. I think there are about 8 in there that it now has access to, and I've built the LSTs for them. All that groundwork is done. Now's the time. Okay, let's like really get into it. Let's ask it some questions. So we can say hi first, and like any good model, will respond to you and say hello. So maybe one question we could ask is, maybe I'm interested. All right, I want to get rid of all Apache in my code for some reason.
You lost an eternal debate about commonsling versus Guava or something, and it's like, all right, I gotta get rid of all the Apache. Where
why not? So I can basically say, okay, well, do I use Apache in my code? So that's interesting already, right? So the model itself now needs more context to it, and it's going to ask you, all right, well, do you mean Apache Commons, HTTP server, Kafka, etc.? So let's say we wanted to say, oh yeah, sorry, I'm actually not that crazy. I just meant about HTTP. So now you can see that it's starting to look for uses here. So if you know the recipes that we have, and it's looking at the types as opposed to method invocations. So it uses the recipe that we have already written for this, and it's going to look for usages of this. It's going to take a little time because we have a couple repos in the background, but that's basically the idea here. So once it gets the results, the recipe itself has a data table at the end of the run in the same way you would have on the platform. So the idea is that you can then take those results and actually have the model look at those results for you. So you don't have to, all right, go look at the data table, whether that's an Excel spreadsheet or a CSV file. It can, for you, go look at it. All right. So what if I wanted to be like, okay, well, it tells me there's no HTTP here, but what about commons? And maybe I meant to say, no, I wanted to see method invocations rather, not types. So now, okay, it's actually looking for actual APIs, so method invocations. And as you see, it goes from using one tool to another. So you basically have this, this chatbot that has access to a bunch of different recipes and other internal tools, and can basically make them used based on what you ask. So not only will it choose the right tool, it'll choose the right argument, and then it'll look at the results for you.
So you've used this term tool. If you want to define that, because when I first saw this, that was a new concept to me.
Absolutely. I'm actually going to go switch.
Although we could discuss it after checking out these results if we want to jump right into that, because they do look intriguing.
I actually wanted to stop it here, the results. Stop screen until we can actually see what a tool is.
Mm-hmm.
But I was not as quick as I thought I would be to switch in between. I'm not a pro like you guys yet. In between different tabs.
Well, we'll invite you on a few more times, and you'll get used to
there you go.
to judoing around your web browser.
All right. So if we look at what we have on the left, this mermaid graph here. So let's start. So this first box here that we see is the user, right? It's okay. So the user has some question of some sort, and then the model has access to some tools. So what I mean by tool, it's basically, you really have to look at it as a set of actions that it can take. So for those who are familiar with RAG, which is retrieval augmented generation, what RAG is basically a tool. So tool is kind of this term that encompasses any action that you can do. So if you think of RAG, that's one type of action it can do. That action being to go look up in some vector database or some external resources, some information based on the user query. In our case, a tool is a recipe run. So you can
zoom in on this diagram a bit more. I can't read this text.
Yeah, for sure. So the idea is that, here, let's focus on this one first.
Wonderful.
So we have one of these types of tools is the open rewrite recipes. And examples of that would be find method invocations. Mm-hmm. So this is just a little, description of what it is. But basically the idea is we have this tool ready to be used, right? We have this recipe, find method invocations, which requires a method pattern. So what's the model's responsibility after it gets your query when you say, oh, how is Apache Commons used? Is that it needs to choose which tool. So thankfully it chose the right one once I said I wanted method invocations, and it chose this one that we saw, and the results are we technically
and kind of the way this works, I guess, is we provide a program that knows how to invoke this recipe, and then annotate that with metadata, or rather a natural language description of the capabilities and usage of this tool, which is then read by the large language model. And when a query is made of it that looks relevant to this tool's description, it calls that program with the arguments that it pieces together from the user's question and from the description of the tool. Is that right?
That is absolutely right. 10 out of 10.
Cool.
That is exactly right. Yeah. So that's its responsibility, right? It's to find which tool to use. In our case, recipes for this subtype of tools. Mm-hmm. But there's also other types of tools that it could use. I mentioned RAG because that's an example that people are a bit more familiar with. We have these other recipes that we could use. The find secrets one is kind of fun. But there's other tools that could be maybe a little bit, on the side or complementary rather to recipes. So these are two that we've come up with. Let's talk about the bar graph one because it's a little bit easier at first. The idea is that this tool doesn't have to be, the find method invocations or a recipe. It can also be, draw me a bar graph based on these values.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you've tried using ChatGPT to do that. So if you go inside, ChatGPT and you chat with it and you say, all right, I have 5 cows, 2 dolphins, and 1 chicken. Draw me a histogram.
Mm-hmm.
Draw me what it would look like as a bar graph in
Mm-hmm.
ASCII. So the little, bars.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to see 5 is going to be 10 times bigger than 2. And, it's not going to
right.
be the right, it's going to make those kind of mistakes just because that's not what it's made for, right?
Mm-hmm.
But this is a simple program to write. As long as the input is passed in the right way, as,
Mm-hmm.
I think we pass it as a JSON in our case of, well, I have these values, and for each values, here are the number of times they appear, or the name of the values, I should say, and this is how many times they all appear.
As a child, when I was frustrated and tedious, or found it very tedious to like memorize times tables or similar kind of very algorithmic sort of skills, I thought, how convenient would it be if I could just like have in my brain like circuitry or a neural pathway that just was a calculator, right? So you wouldn't have to try to mold your fleshy circuits to fit the cold and perfect logic of a machine. And this is kind of a similar concept for leave the fuzzy things to the LLM, and for anything where precision or exactitude or a deterministic method is more applicable, have the LLM call out to the deterministic tool rather than having the LLM do its best to fuzzily approximate the behavior of that more deterministic tool.
Yeah, exactly. I like the term also, cold and perfect computer. I love that, or circuitry.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly it, right? It's I think it's the perfect way to say it. You're not trying to train, your brain as a kid, or rather, you would have liked to not have to train your brain as a kid to know this multiplications, but just have a simple calculator. So that could have been a tool, right, where it's just calculator. So sometimes if you use ChatGPT and you ask it to write some Python script that's very simple, maybe a regex, and you just want to test if it works or not,
Mm-hmm.
it will run that Python script and look at if the output matched. Well, that's a tool inside of ChatGPT, so it has access to this very small runtime where it can run whatever it generated. And here, for recipe, the argument is the method pattern. So when we saw Apache comments star, but in this case, for the ChatGPT having a tool for this Python script, the argument to that tool, to that Python runtime, would be the Python code that it just generated and that it wants to double check on.
Mm-hmm.
So really, the sky's the limit. This idea of having a tool for these models is a framework. Then it really depends what you need to do. Maybe you wanted a model to check the weather for you. Well, instead of having it just guess it, which wouldn't be very useful, maybe you have a quick API call that it can just go scrape another website, or I'm sure there's an API somewhere that you can call to get the weather in a certain city, and that's really all you need, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the idea behind it. So this, maybe you're wondering how it was built a little bit, and you might see that I have here LangChain. So we talk about this framework, right? I talked about RAG. I talked about these models having, chats. All of this
And,
is,
I know you defined RAG up front, but it went one ear and right out the other for me. Can you remind me what that stands for?
yeah, absolutely. Retrieval augmented generation.
That's right.
Yeah. So it's when you want, basically, instead of having to fine tune a model, a chatbot on a precise subject, it has access to external resources. So
Right.
that's basically the gist.
Right.
Of its
Yes.
utility.
Immediately after you said that, and this is probably just because we say the word recipe 10,000 times a day, I immediately was like, RAG, recipe augmented generation. So that's kind of thematically what we're talking about here, but I'm like, that's not right. That's not what she said.
I love it though. Yeah, if only that acronym was not taken already. Or maybe we can, kind of
Steal it.
gaslight everyone into thinking we were the original
That's always
RAG.
what it meant. Yeah.
It was us all along. So so back to the framework and how the sausage is made. Basically, LangChain is this framework, right, where it lets you very easily plug in whatever you need to plug in. So whether, in our case, we use OpenAI right now for this, but really it's, bring in your own model, BYOM. You can have, there's so many third-party companies that offer APIs, and they're all uniform in how they're called. So LangChain is able to leverage basically this multitude of choice that we have for these models. It goes the same way for RAG. There's a lot of different vector databases that you can use. Those are all ready to be plugged into LangChain. Here, this one I'm showing you right now is the LangChain 4J, because they've also, so they were Python, but they also built it for Java, which is really useful in our case, since that's what we like to build a lot of our tools in. And a fun fact, actually, that Tim reminded me of is that, so we use LangChain for J, but LangChain for J uses us as well. So Tim, I don't know if you want to take over, since you were the one who reminded me of this.
Yeah, sure. So, as folks know, it's a bit of a hobby of mine is open source. So I like to improve projects left and right wherever I can. And one option I saw was that the folks at LangChain for J, they were using AssertJ, but they weren't using it consistently, and they weren't using it to the best of the library's capabilities. So what I did was twofold. One is that I improved the usage of AssertJ through recipes. And then secondly, I added the same checks that we have on our own pull requests, where any new pull requests get those checks applied, such that going forward, they get the very best way to use AssertJ with any pull request going into LangChain for J. So very neat little integration, and giving back from a project that we also take from. So it's very, goes both ways.
Exactly. No, it's great. All right. Well, any questions about this? Oops, outzoomed here. Otherwise, I might just continue with the demo and really show.
Let's see some more demo.
Perfect.
Sure.
Let's do that. All right. And let's go see what the answers were. All right. So as a reminder, I had asked, okay, well, I wanted to know about Apache Commons and about method invocations, not types. So you can see the different tools that it uses here. So this is the recipe. This is the method pattern. And it collects everything into the data table. So for those who use the CLI, that's using study, so that we can actually go get the results. So one thing I on purpose didn't mention until now, because I wanted to make sure the concept of tool was really clear before we continued, there's utility to use multiple tools, one after the other. So before, when I was talking about a tool, it kind of was more as an answer to a question, and then the model can use whatever tool's output, whatever the output of the tool was, to then formulate its answers. But there's some times where it might be useful to actually use tools one after the other. So in this case, we have process data table. So like we said, in the back of this, there's a model, right? And there's a context size limit, because you can't just like feed it the whole Wikipedia. It's going to be way too much. And some data tables, might have a lot of results. If you, go look for every time list is being used as a data type, you're going to have a lot of answers, a lot of rows in your data table. So one way to go around this is basically to force it to do some very simple SQL based on what the question was here. So this is what you see here in the SQL. It's, pretty straightforward. It just, looked at everything basically. But if we ask it to do something a little bit more in the sense of summarizing or actually going to the end of our question, depending on what it was, then you can see some really cool results. And that's what I'm going to show next. So as you see here, it just, went to get a couple examples from the rows in the data table and, gave me everything that was present here. So that's a sample. So what if I say, all right, so can you draw me a histogram of let's say the top 5 most used Apache Commons methods?
Aha, Chekhov's bar graph comes back.
Mm-hmm.
Familiar with the literary idea of Chekhov's gun? If you, as an author, write a story where a gun is placed on the mantelpiece in the first act, by the third act or whatever, it must be fired. That's what I'm alluding to.
There you go. Exactly. It was all forthcoming. So there you go. So this is what it gets. So I'd like it maybe to run it again to get the sequel, because instead I just took the sample and draw the bar graph. So let me just refresh its memory and say, rerun the recipe, then do the appropriate SQL query to get the top 5 most used Apache Commons methods. Then draw the bar graph. And then we'll see this whole ballet, execute in front of us. So hopefully I didn't bust too many. Oh, great, perfect. So what I'm really happy with what it did here is that it didn't try to rerun the recipe actually, because it already had the results of the recipe run. So I'm really happy that it did that. And so we can see now the SQL query actually gets this idea of count. And not only that, then it groups them by method and orders them by usage count with a limit of 5. So that's when we're like, okay, now it really, it's still a simple SQL query. Oh, that's a tongue twister. Simple SQL query. But it really, this is still something that would have been, a mental load to have to write this ourselves, or click a couple of times in either Excel, or even have a little script for the CSV file. So now this is done for you, and it does a very simple bar graph here. So now I'm pretty happy about the way that it looks here. And so you can keep chatting with it and look through it. So maybe while we talk a bit more about this and, what else can we do with this and how actual people are going to be able to use this, since it's just still a beta, let's ask it. Okay, thank you. Always got to thank our LLM overlords. Overlords. So thank you. Now I'm worried about secrets in my code. All right, well, perfect. It's going to go start to look for secrets. And, from there, we're going to be able to see the actual results. So you might be wondering, okay, so is every recipe there? For now, no, we really focused on search recipes. However, we really see that this is the place that it can kind of shine on, is more of an impact analysis. What's cool, though, is if you're looking for, and this is actually a kind of a problem that was brought up to me in a meeting internally, where someone said, oh, this is great. This would be particularly good because sometimes I have to run 3 recipes. It's always going to be find types, find methods, and find text. And what this lets you do basically now is that it lets you actually run all these recipes in one by just asking one simple query. So if you're looking, okay, well, I'm wondering, well, here are all our secrets are out, but that's okay. Those are
they're coming from provider test or credentials provider test.java. So those are probably pretty safe.
They absolutely are. This is on our default organization, but it's still pretty funny to look at them. So I appreciate that I try to do a table. I don't know if that's just because it's a bit too much information, and if I was here, let's see if this will help. Yeah, getting better.
It looks like it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
pretty
So
good.
yeah, fairly table-like. Just had a few long, awkward strings.
Yeah, it's almost like it should have known that maybe secrets are really, really long. But yeah, so the idea is, you have this problem, you're trying to find, how something is being used in your code, or you're trying to find a file or something, and you have a vague memory of what's in there. Well, instead of having to go, on the platform and run one recipe after the other, or same thing with the CLI, this kind of lets you say, okay, well, I'm looking for this. Run all the recipes you think would be useful to find. And then you can have the results and actually see if there's something that you need to look into, right? So the application in search, I think, is really where it shines, basically. And it's going to let you much more quickly get an idea and what's inside your code. And it goes back to, you don't know what you don't know. So being able to search through this is in a way that you can kind of keep coding on the side. You don't have to stop and relearn a framework. I think it's great.
Yeah, it's just not having to. There's all these technologies that we use on the regular that you or that you might not use on the regular enough to have all the cheat sheets memorized. Regular expressions, SQL queries, method patterns, etc., etc. All of these tools that we both use directly and write programs around to manipulate, aggregate, distill information. It's just you have to wait, how do I write a method pattern to do this search recipe again? If you can let the language model handle some of those things for you, well, it's just that much easier to ask and answer questions.
Absolutely. I think, when I was working on this, kind of a moment and that I never thought I would experience, it was very meta. I wanted to debug something on how a file was saved. It's not really important. And I realized I could chat with the model to debug itself. And that was really fun. That was kind of oh, this is great to be able to have the model debug itself, basically, which was just great to, I didn't have to remember what were the names exactly of the parameters or argument for some recipe run. So that was really, really cool, basically. It just keeps you in your flow.
Yeah.
And it's also very, like you said, keeps you in your flow. It's like a tool like this is not going to get distracted looking up SQL queries, then seeing you have 12 new unread emails, and then like 3/4 of an hour later trying to remember what you were doing, and then come back. No, it just keeps you here. It keeps you focused.
You make an excellent point, Tim and Justine. Justine, is there a way that we could give a large language model ADHD?
I think if you use a very small model, then it's gonna definitely
It's kind of built
other
in.
Yeah,
I'm just imagining it. I'm imagining it getting bored halfway through, and then it's like doing a code search, but then it's like, no, wait, what are the stock tickers right now, or how did the baseball team do? And you come back with a histogram of method invocations and baseball scores mixed together somehow.
All mixed in together, absolutely. Yeah. So this is, like we said, this is, we want to start 2025 with kind of what's new, what we're ready, what we're excited about.
Yeah.
I think it's really great because it's AI that's leveraging open rewrite, and I think there's a lot of tools out there that themselves leverage AI, but here it's kind of the opposite, right? We're really happy to have this tool that we can offer these models to basically work on your code. So this is going to be soon available, soon with an asterisk, always available to people. There's a couple other chatbots that we're working on too, and we kind of need to figure out if we want to make this into one chatbot or if we want to make them separate. And so there's going to be a lot to come, I'd say, in the next 2 months. Definitely.
Yeah. For me, this really, I wouldn't describe myself as an AI skeptic necessarily, but many of the existing chatbots and tools I have seen to have limited utility for me personally. Something like like I use like GitHub Copilot in my day to day code, but I mostly only accept the suggestions that are about the boilerplate stuff because filling in repetitive things if I'm filling in it's great when I'm like authoring a recipe and need to fill in descriptions for 20 column headings in a data table or recipe options or whatever, but most of the time writing the code isn't the hard part, and a lot of these existing tools help with writing the new code, but I didn't really need help with that. It was like figuring out what code to write to solve the problem I have was more the hard part, and they just blindly guessing can't really help with that. And so this way of using deterministic tools for the things they are strong at, and using the language models for the things they are strong at, seems to me very promising. It seems to me that a lot of these AI tools have been like when the only tool you have is a large language model, everything looks like a nail or whatever, however
Yeah.
that metaphor goes. And it's like, no, actually, there are some problems that the calculator still does work better, right? So just use the
Yeah.
calculator where applicable.
Absolutely. One sentence that I really liked that we put in the book we wrote that was released back in September, it's, don't butter your toast with a chainsaw. And
I
it's
mean,
like,
it does sound kind of fun though. Like
well,
I'm
it's
just
fun to see
imagining.
fail.
Well, here's what I'm picturing. Here's what I'm picturing. You cover the entire countertop with toast. You have a big tub of butter. You put the chainsaw in the butter. You hold it over the toast and just let it rip, and it just sprays butter everywhere. As long as you coat every surface with toast, it kind of works out, right?
It does, but now you have butter everywhere,
Now you
and
have butter
also,
everywhere.
you have to pay for the electricity for the chainsaw or the gas,
Kevin appreciates
albeit
my
not a lot.
suggestion. Thank you, Kevin.
But I love that that's the image you have. That's great. I definitely want to be invited to brunch now, Sam. If you host it and that's what it
Well,
looks like.
it would probably be Genevieve doing the cooking, and you would probably be happy that was the case. But we could maybe do a chainsaw butter toast buttering exhibition in the backyard or
I
something.
love it. Everyone bring your poncho.
Yeah, bring
Well,
poncho, bring the safety glasses. We're buttering toast.
Now we need new
now
merch.
I want to now have you on stage at the Code Remix Summit with a chainsaw and a pack of butter.
I'll be so much more careful with phrases that I coin now.
Yeah, I'll hear the wild phrase and be like, we could make that work.
Yeah, let's do it. I guess that's what it is when you work in a startup, right? Everyone's like, yeah, let's do it. What's the problem? Let's solve it.
Yeah, totally.
So yeah, but yeah, to go back to the actual idiom, I think you could search, through these files using an LLM, but why would you do that? First of all, there's a lot that it can miss. The more text it has, the more expensive it is, the more slow it is, and the more it can get lost because of noise. So we have these tools ready. They are perfect. They have been tested on millions and millions of lines of code. Why not use them? And that's really, that's the idea behind don't butter your toast with the chainsaw. So yeah, so keep an eye out for sure. We'll do a nice blog post when we release this, and keep putting some details on how you can use it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, very cool. Well, thanks for joining us, Justine. I think this is a great demo, and I hope all of our viewers think the same.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to be back in a few months with the next version of this.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Absolutely.
we'll. I'm sure we'll have you on again very soon.
Absolutely.
Oh, let's see. Any
So, yeah.
closing remarks, Tim? I guess we just, of course, should remind everyone to come to the Code Remake Summit in Miami, where you could get any of us to demo to you whatever the current status of mod agent or whatever we'll be calling it at that time is. I'm sure we'll be presenting on that subject there as well. So if you thought this was really cool and want to see a more advanced version of what we were doing today, definitely come to the Code Remix Summit, because you will get today's version plus whatever 3 months or so of development works out to.
Absolutely, and I think we're even considering a hack track on Spring AI. So if you want to do maybe your own application developments with AI, that would also be interesting. But it's all coming up, and will be up on the schedule pretty soon. So keep an eye on that.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for coming, everybody. Have
Thank
a
you.
great week.
Bye, everyone.
Cheers.
Bye.
See you next week. Cheers.